What's up, everybody? Welcome back to a brand new video. I'm so excited to have you back today because today we are talking about how to create an album from start to finish. And I wanted to put this video out there because if you followed my channel, you know that I recently put out my debut album, Freedom. And it was a very exciting process, one that took me half a year to really get all the stuff together and write it and produce it and have it mixed and mastered and then finally out into the world. And I had a lot of people asking me about the process and how I actually did it. So I came up with kind of a 6-step method that I want to share with you in this video that will hopefully help you kind of conceptualize how to actually put that all together and take you from the initial idea and all the way to completion. But before we really dive in, I have two things I want to share with you. The first one is a totally free guide that I want to give to you as my your gift for watching this video, and it's called the Composer's Toolkit. So if you're at all interested in kind of creating music on the computer, and you don't really know where to get started, or maybe you've been doing this for a while, but you want to see if you have any elements that are kind of missing from your setup, then I want to give you a totally free guide. And it basically goes into every element that I think are the bare essentials you need to get started and producing music virtually, because it's easier than ever before to start writing music on the computer or on your laptop or wherever, but there are some essential elements that you do need in order to make sure your setup is complete. So it's a totally free guide if you want to check it out, and it goes into all of that, and hopefully it really helps you. And the second thing I want to share with you is that I'm actually launching a brand new course all about how I wrote my album called Freedom. And not only does it talk about the process I went through and goes into each track a little bit and tell you about the story and everything like that, but it's also going to talk about each of the song's lyrics, the story, how I put those together, came up with the messages, my step-by-step lyric writing system, and also the arrangement, the production, the orchestrations behind every single song will be dived into as well, step by step, like super comprehensive, so you understand my mindset and how I basically came around to the arrangements of every single one of the songs. So I'll share more information with you about this next week, but I just wanted to give you a heads up in case you were interested. And because a lot of people were asking me how I put the album together, so I wanted to make a comprehensive resource to actually share with you how I did that. So that's coming next week. But anyway, before we really talk about that too much, let's dive into how to actually create an album. So first of all, let's cover the very basics. What is an album? I think most of us know that it's a collection of songs or pieces in a sequential format. And it's usually meant to be listened to like in one listening, right? To be digested as a whole cohesive experience for most albums. So it typically has like a logical flow and some sort of cohesive signature that kind of pulls it all together and binds it nice and tight. I personally find that anything from 8 to 13 tracks is pretty normal for any standard album. I've seen people do like up to 16 or 17 tracks on an album, but those are kind of like the outliers. And anything less than 5 or 6 tracks tends to be like an EP, so a smaller collection of songs. Some artists, however, have done like double or triple albums at the same time as larger releases to really stand out from the competition. So a lot of the time they will actually do this to really make their music have a big stamp in the marketplace, right? And this is not necessary at all, but they just do it because maybe it's a big passion project or they've been working on it for a long time and they just want to release it as a multi-part series, which totally makes sense for them, But yeah, generally the albums are meant to be listened to in a single sitting. So it's like a full experience. So you might be wondering, like, why should I put together an album? Like, what's the benefit of doing an album versus like putting out a single, right? The main thing is that it represents an artist's form of expression at any point in time, right? So, I mean, you could say the same thing for a single, like, oh, it represents my writing style at this time, but it's more of a collection of a body of work, an album, And it's like, usually when you're writing an album, it's like within a certain period of time. Like, let's say you write 12 songs within a year, for example, and that you will usually capture that stylistic tendencies that you have at that point in time. And that will kind of make the whole album more cohesive that way, if that makes sense, So yeah, it kind of marks the creative and stylistic output of an artist's career. And you'll notice that for a lot of artists from, album to album, the style kind of starts to evolve and change. But within the one album, typically, even if there's kind of a variety of styles in there, the overall feeling of the album is still cohesive because it's been written at a certain moment in time rather than being spread out over like decades, for example. You can focus on many songs at once, right? And you can think of them as all working together. So rather than thinking of only singles and only having one song work by itself, you can think of it as a cohesive whole that the songs all should work together and follow like a single theme, for example, right? And you can tell extended stories that are bridged together in the form of music, right? And like storytelling is so important when we're writing music or putting music into the world, because the whole idea of listening to music is like an experience, right? So if the listener can listen to your entire story in an album, then it's a lot more fulfilling, you could say, than just listening to one single, right? And another reason is like many people still enjoy downloading and buying albums to simply to support the artist, right? Even though many people don't have CD players nowadays, it's still a really nice way if you offer a CD, to support the artist that way by purchasing it. So, and generally there's a little more lasting value than singles, right? For the obvious reason that there's just like more music in there, and so even and if you create a CD, right, there's some monetary value to that as well that you can share with the world. But let's talk about a couple things to consider when you are starting to put your album together. So the first thing that's really really important is the budget, the money, right? Are there any like music video or production or distribution or engineer fees? Like who will you have to pay in order to make this project come to life? So you will have to do your own research, especially if you're just a singer-songwriter. Let's say you're not a producer, not an arranger, not a mixer, mastering engineer. These will all be things you want to consider when you are starting to put your album together. Also think about a deadline. Like, do you have a certain date to aim for? Is there a certain like time that you want to get it out into the world and, let it just live on its own, right? That's pretty important as well. Also, you want to think about a message. So what will the underlying theme and the message be? Is it about a positive message? Is it kind of like a hopeful message, like something that's like on the other side? Or is it more of like a party anthem type of, album? You can go in many, many directions here, but I would always think about the theme and the message that you want to lie throughout the entire record from start to finish. And all the songs will be kind of consistent with that theme. So that's pretty important as well. Then you want to think about the style, right? So what general stylistic flair do you want to go for? Is it pop music? Is it jazz music, cinematic, rock music? Like there's so many different options, but obviously you're probably going to go with the one that you're comfortable with and, put a body of work together that kind of represents the style that you're kind of used to putting out in the first place. Also, what is your goal with the record? Like, what do you hope to get out of the release? Do you want to be world famous? Do you want to tour the world and perform your music? Or do you just care about putting your album out to the world and you don't really care about, making money with it? Like, you just want to share your music with the world because you love to write music, right? So that's another thing to think about. So let's dive into the very first step that I think is very crucial, and that is to create a deadline, right? So before you write any music, you want to commit to the process of creating, producing, and finishing a full album. It's all in the mindset, right? Like if you really want to get this out there and done, then you have to commit to it. You can't just start it and then say like, okay, never mind, I'm not going to do it. And you're just going to have unfinished work sitting on your computer or on your hard drive. It's going to make it a lot harder to pick back up if you just drop it. So I want you to commit to the process and then give yourself a deadline, like 6 months to a year, etc. It could be more if you want to, but I think anywhere from 6 months to a year is very solid. So then you have a clear vision of when you want it to be out into the world, right? That gives you a very solid deadline of saying, okay, I'm going to start it here and I'm going to end it here. I'm going to finish it here and get it out into the public so anyone can hear it. And then you can start breaking it down from there. Like how many weeks or months should be spent on the writing process? Do you want to spend 2 months writing out all the songs? Do you want to spend another month arranging it, like putting all the instruments together? Do you want to spend another month sending it off to the mixing engineer, mastering engineer? Like kind of break it down into chunks so they become manageable time blocks so you know what you're going to be doing at any certain point in time. So yeah, breaking it down into chunks will just make the task that much more manageable. So for my album Freedom, I wanted to release it by August 29th, which is my birthday. So I knew I had 6 to 7 months to get it all done because I started the album in January. Technically, I wrote the first song in like November, December, but I really wanted to make sure that I had a certain deadline, and I thought my birthday was the perfect time because it's literally like 8 to 9 months, which is plenty of time. So I knew I had that amount of time to work with, and the time passed by pretty quickly, to be honest. The next step is actually deciding on a theme, like a general message. So, what do you want your album to say? What's like the message, right? What's the theme? So, what does this represent at this point in your life? That's a question you can ask yourself, you know? For me, a theme should always be a directional choice, like something very deliberate, a statement that shows the world who we truly are, you know? So if you can write down a few core themes to choose from, then you will be on your way, because then you'll actually have a few things that you believe in, a few things that you might want to talk about in your album that really represents what you're talking about at this point in time. So, for example, self-belief or breakup or change or acceptance. Like, do you want the overall theme of the album to be about any of these things? So I think having a certain thematic idea flowing throughout the album is very, very important. Then the third step actually comes into writing the music, which is obviously very fun. So this is the most exciting part. And you can really let your imagination run wild here, and you can write in whatever styles you want, which is wonderful. You might decide that 6 tracks is enough to tell your story, or you can go through like 12 or 13 tracks. It really depends on how much creative juice you have and, what you feel is sufficient to, put your heart into, what you think is enough to tell your story. I would say, like, to start off with, focus on getting the melody, the harmony, the rhythm, and the lyrics all written down. So those are kind of like the core elements that you want to make sure are nailed down, but before you actually start arranging and producing the entire thing, right? So those are like the core elements, the foundations of songwriting in these elements. So make sure you have those down first, because those really make up the foundations of music. Then we move on to step 4. So after you have those things written down, then you actually move into the arranging and production phase. And so now that you have the music sketched out, now you start adding instruments, whether they're real or virtual, on the computer. You want to elaborate on those musical ideas and flesh them out with additional layers and instrumentation. That's basically what I'm talking about when I say arranging and production. It's a really fun creative process, and it's almost like secondary composition. Like, the first composition is like you writing the music and getting out those ideas onto paper or in your DAW. But the secondary composition is like when you're arranging, you might decide to add a couple of counter melodies in here or there. You might want to add in a little lick with your guitar. You might want to play a little piano riff. Like, these are all additional compositional elements that you're adding in there, right? The composing never really ends until you get to like the mixing mastering phase. So yeah, the core musical ideas are presented in your melody and harmony and lyrics, like we talked about in phase 3, but the production can also lend to the emotional experience. In fact, it's very important, right? The way the instruments that you choose, the way they're arranged, those can definitely make or break a certain song's like emotional experience for the listener. Then we move on to step 5, which is mixing and mastering. So in order to do this, you'll either need to do it yourself or find an engineer, right? Someone who does this professionally. And for me, I tend to like to do it myself, because I actually like being in control of all the music. But at the same time, someone actually reached out to me and offered to mix and master my album for me for free. His name is Dave, and he runs his company under Doves Go West. So a big thank you to Dave for working on this for me. But yeah, you're either going to do it yourself or you're going to send it off to somebody else. Now, cost for a good mix alone, like for one song, can range anywhere from like $200 a song to like $10,000 a song, $20,000 for the highest like AAA mixers who are really known for their work. So you can really get up there if you really want the very, very best. Cost for a good master range from anywhere like $50 a song to like $200 a song. So just you have a bit of reference there. But mixing is all about taking your existing production and your tracks and polishing them up to a professional level using balancing, like volume balancing, and then processing like EQ, compression, delay, reverb, etc. And that is an entire phase in itself that is very important after the arranging process. Mastering is when you ensure the album sounds good as a whole and make sure that it's also competitive volume-wise with the rest of the market. You also want to make sure that the album is set up well for distribution to get it out there into the world without any issues there. So yeah, very, very important. The mastering is kind of like the finalization of the album making process. And following that, then you get into distribution and getting it out into the world, right? So how do you want to put it out there? Do you want to put it on like a distribution service like DistroKid, CD Baby, or TuneCore, or do you want to submit it privately to like a publisher? Maybe you can like they can use your album to put it into sync, right? Like film scoring or like TV shows that need additional music in the background. That's also possible too. But this will kind of determine like your audience and how many people you can potentially reach, right? So, if you release it publicly into the world, then it might attract a few people who like that style of music. But if it's more public, if it's more private, right, then it's not going to really have as much impact because no one from the outside world is really going to see it. So I personally believe that your hard work in doing an album deserves a complete launch. It doesn't deserve to just sit on your hard drive and your computer and just rot away. You should definitely celebrate it with a big launch into the world, especially if you're writing for yourself. Let me share with you kind of a behind the scenes of my personal album Freedom, and I'll share with you kind of the track order and how I kind of thought about the process. So my album Freedom actually has 12 songs in total, and I want to kind of share with you the order of them and how I decided to arrange them in their final listing order, okay? The very first one is called Prologue, and it's actually an instrumental piece. It's really short and sweet. It's like less than a minute long, and it's more like an appetizer for the rest of the album. It's kind of like a Disney style cinematic piece. Then Spark was actually my lead single from the album, and it's all about like finding your purpose in life, and it's more of a Disney orchestral song as well. So it kind of continues on from where Prologue left off, and it just establishes this kind of big, expansive orchestral sound that is one of my favorite styles to write in. Empty Holes was actually the one song that inspired this entire album to begin with. So that's number 3, and it's kind of similar to number 2 in a way, but it talks about the hope of seeing others after being alone. So again, that kind of hopeful message, right? And again, it's more of the Disney orchestral sound as well. Then All I Have is a personal thank you letter to my parents, and it's in an a cappella style, but it's still kind of like Disney-like with the chord progressions, but there's some orchestra in there as well. So it's starting to depart a little bit stylistically, but it still uses the orchestra in there as well. Then I kind of switched things up completely, and I wrote a song about getting outside and enjoying life. Again, it's kind of this big positive message, and it brings in my personal love of big band and Michael Bublé. So I wanted to write a song with the big band style, and that's number 5. And it kind of transitions seamlessly from All I Have, number 4. Number 6 is called Once Again, and this is like my full-on Disney orchestral stuff happening here. So it's like a rekindling of lost love. It's like a duet with a girl, and Disney theater orchestral. So definitely like musical theater style here. I went all out with that. I really wanted to write a song in this style. Number 7, Ready, kind of turns things down a little bit and switches it up to more like indie pop. So there is I called it easy listening pop, but Ready is kind of like my love letter to the art of songwriting. So, it has some guitars in there. It has a really sweet little progression that kind of goes down then back up, and that repeats, very similar to the home progression in Michael Bublé's song, one of my favorites. The next song, called Together, is like a rock song, and that kind of leads from number 7 because 7 has guitars in there, and number 8 takes the guitars to the max, and it's a more up-tempo, upbeat song. So there's an excitement of, seeing your friends, and I call it Disney rock pop because a friend of mine said, oh, it sounds like a Disney song, so I put that in as well. The number 9 is called Fall Away, and this one takes a turn for the more, for the darker theme, right? But this one in particular is still upbeat. It's more like a personal plea to a family friend of mine. So it contains these themes of drug abuse and depression, and it's more of a classic R&B song, but it still leads from Together pretty well, I think, because they still have an up-tempo feel to both of them. And then Up to You continues on from the up-tempo pop sort of thing, and it's all about making a difference in our lives, and it was inspired by Charlie Puth's songs like, We Don't Talk Anymore, and what is it? I forgot the name of the other one, but I called it dark pop. And then number 11 is called Blink of an Eye, and this one kind of goes back to the orchestral side of things, where it's all about missing a loved one. And this one in particular was inspired by my brother who went off to university. And then finally, Nothing Without You is cinematic orchestral once again to finish off the entire thing. It takes you on a journey, and this one is a song dedicated to my faith as a Christian. So I wanted to write a song about that in there as well. But you can see generally, like, this is how I laid out the entire album. I kind of started and ended with an orchestral feel. In the middle, I experimented with more styles like a cappella, big band, Disney stuff, of course, but like rock as well, classic R&B, darker pop, indie pop, right? All the styles that kind of influenced my stylistic tendencies growing up. And what's interesting is, you actually don't need to have the same style in your entire album. You can actually mix it up a little bit. But whether that's through like the lyrics kind of bonding them together, or the overall message of the whole album making it feel cohesive, or maybe it's just like a key change from one song to another that seems pretty seamless, you want to make sure there's an element in the album that kind of ties it all together. That's really important. So you can decide what that is. It's totally up to you, but that is what's going to really benefit your listener's experience, is just knowing that there's something that ties everything together, So I hope that all makes sense. I hope these 6 steps kind of helped you. And let me know if you have any questions in the comments below about the album making process, or kind of how I went through it. Again, I wanna give you my guide called the Composer's Toolkit, because if you're kind of interested in making music virtually, but you're not really sure where to get started, or you just want to make sure you have all the right tools, this guide, the Composer's Toolkit, will basically give you those answers and give you the bare necessities that are affordable, mind you, that you need to really get started. So you can download that in the first link as well. And just a quick reminder that my course called Behind the Album Freedom is coming out next week. And if you're really interested in kind of the production arrangement of every single one of the songs, plus talking more about the lyrics, breaking them down, and talking about how they're all constructed and put together in a cohesive way, that's going to be available next Monday. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll catch you in the next video. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.